It is especially good to see so many people here who did not get the memo. Or maybe you did get the memo, but you decided to consciously ignore it. And by the memo, I mean the memo that has been distributed sort of far and wide lately, and equally so by people on the nominally liberal left as by those on the right, though perhaps for different reasons. The memo which says that we are not really supposed to gather for conversations like this, that we are not supposed to get together to discuss the issues that will be discussed in this room this evening, the issues of race and racism and racial inequity and white privilege and institutional injustice and oppression of our brothers and sisters of color. We are not to speak of those things, so says this memo that again has been distributed so far and wide in recent years, because to discuss it is to be divisive, it is to deepen the racial divisions that have roiled us as a nation for so long. It is to ignore the fundamental don't you know, the critical don't you know, and the utterly false truth spoken by then State Senator, soon to be U.S. Senator, and now President of the United States, Barack Obama, back in 2004. It was the first time that most of us became familiar with him at all. He was running for the U.S. Senate. He was picked to give the keynote address, as you may recall, at the Democratic National Convention in Boston. And at that time, he got up and he gave a talk that was, as is so true for so many of his speeches, met with rounds of extended applause. One line, though, stuck out. It was a line you may very well remember. It is a line that I opened my latest book with. It is the line where he said, "We're not a black America and a white America. We're not a Latino America and an Asian America. We're the United States of America." Man, was that an incredible line. I mean, the applause went on for like 15 hours. Started at 9 o'clock. About 11, I was sleepy and needed to go to bed. I had 2 small children. I knew they'd be up soon. Went to bed, woke up the next morning, turned on the Today Show, and they were still this line. It's an amazing line. I'm exaggerating, but only by about that much. We're a United States of America, is what he said. Of course, even as he spoke those words, a man as intelligent as he, as well-read as he, as erudite as he, as informed as he, must have known as he spoke them that he was speaking an untruth, a profound distortion, one might even say a lie, for political purposes. Because even as he said it, that summer, that very summer, a report had been released from MIT and the University of Chicago, both of their economics departments, neither of them notorious for being left-wing departments by any stretch, quite the opposite, which said what? That job applicants with white-sounding names were 50% more likely to be called back for interviews than those with so-called black-sounding names, even when all the qualifications, credentials, experience, seniority, education were identical, indistinguishable, which is to suggest that this claim that we were a united nation as opposed to a very divided one was not at all true. At the very moment that then State Senator, soon to be U.S. Senator, now President Barack Obama, argued that we were a united place and received all of that applause, the Justice Department at that very moment was gathering data about which I'm quite certain he was aware, which found what? That black and Latino males, 2 to 3 times more likely than their white counterparts, to have their vehicles stopped and then to be physically searched for drugs or other illegal contraband, even though white males, on the occasions when we are searched, are 4 times more likely, according to the Justice Department, to actually have this stuff on us. I'd like to repeat that so we're clear about the data. Black and brown men, 2 to 3 times more likely to be stopped. White men, 4 times more likely to be guilty on the occasions when we are. Now, I did not need a Justice Department report to tell me this. I knew this from personal experience, and I can speak about it because the statute of limitations has expired. And because I'm in church. And even though I'm Jewish, that supposedly means something. I can tell you. See, I worked as a community organizer for 15 months in the public housing projects in New Orleans in the mid-90s, and I can assure you that I saw fewer drugs in public housing in that 15-month period than I saw on a typical weekend on the 8th floor of Monroe Hall, Tulane University, from the fall of 1986 to the spring of '87. That would be my freshman year. Indeed, I saw fewer drugs in 15 months in public housing than I saw on a typical Saturday night in room 804, which I think was my room. One can't be certain of these things. It's been a long time, and after all, it is a story about drugs. So, but you see, when Barack Obama issued that statement and claimed that we were not a black or a white America or Latino America or whatnot. He was saying that in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, because our political system insists that those who would be our leaders lie to us. We can't have this conversation because we're told that if we have the conversation, it only makes the problem worse. We should talk less about race and the problem will go away. Now I want you to ask yourself, about what other social problem would we say that with a straight face? Would we say that about any other social problem? That the less we talk about it, the better the situation will be. I'll give you a few examples. World hunger. Perhaps we could say that if we stopped talking about world hunger, food would miraculously appear on the plates of the starving. But no one would say that. Right? Or crime. Maybe if we didn't talk about crime, no one would ever get held up at gunpoint again. See how easy that is? Why we should just stop talking about it. Or educational failure, schools not educating children. Well, why don't we just stop talking about it? Everyone will get AIDS. It makes no sense. To blame the dialogue, to blame the conversation about racism for the problem of racism is like blaming your speedometer for the speeding ticket that you just got. Makes no sense. The speedometer did not cause you to get the speeding ticket. The speedometer just told you what happened. It's sort of just an indicator of a problem. It's not the problem. We're told we have to move on. That's a precious one. We're told that we can't talk about these legacies of racism and institutional injustice. I mean, it's true, of course. Most honest people will acknowledge it's true. Some, of course, not honest will not. But even those who acknowledge the reality of the problem throughout our history will say, well, it's all true, Tim, but really at some point we just have to really, and I know it doesn't sound right, and I know it might sound harsh, but at some point we just have to move on. We can't dwell in the past. Now that's interesting. Being articulated in a country such as ours, which maybe more so than any country on earth, dearly loves to live in the past. We love that stuff. We do it all the time. That's what July 4th is, in case y'all hadn't figured that out. That breaking away from the British thing, that didn't happen last week. It was a really long time ago. We keep on talking about it, and we keep on setting off fireworks for it, and eating hot dogs and apple pie, dressing up in red, white, and blue, big I Heart the USA buttons on our hats. That is living in the past. No one complains about it. And I have to say, it's a bit ironic and odd and a bit contradictory and even absurd and intellectually obscene for people on the right in particular to claim that people of color should move past the past when they have deemed those on the right their own political movement that should be called the Tea Party. Because I think that also is a rather old reference. When you come to rallies in tri-corner hats and Revolutionary War costumes and powdered wigs carrying muskets and speaking Old English, you are really not in a position to tell anyone else to get past the past. Feel free to lead by example. Let go of that. Move on. Get over it. Something. Right? But they just want some to get past the past, not themselves. We have to be honest that we've inherited these horrific legacies, you see, and we live with them today. The past is not some compartmentalized thing that we can put in a box and simply talk about in a history class and then come to the present as if it had never happened. Life is not like a video game, where you can hit start over or replay or reset because you don't like the way the game is going. We teach our children in like 3rd or 4th grade about this concept of inertia, right, as a physical property. The idea that an object in motion will continue in the same general direction until a force of equal or greater weight pushes against it to stop its forward motion. But what we don't tell our children, and what we may not know ourselves, is that inertia is not just a property of the physical universe. It is a property of the socioeconomic and the political and the cultural universe as well. And so that which happens in one generation affects the next, and the next, and the next, right on down the line until a force of equal or greater weight pushing against it changes that trajectory. We are that force or not. That is up to us. But make no mistake that the inertia of all that past continues to affect us. And so right now as I speak, not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, 20, 30, 40, or 50, but right now and next week and next month, unless something changes, and I dare say between now and then it will not, the median net worth for white families in this country, not the median net worth for wealthy white families, I just mean for average, everyday white families, is about 11 to 12 times that of the median for black families, 8 times that of the median for Latino families. It is Not because we have worked harder. It's not because we have prayed harder, God knows. It is not because we as white folks possess some superior investment wisdom about which people of color are sorely lacking. I mean, if we have learned nothing from the current economic meltdown, perhaps we can at least walk away with this lesson intact. Shall we? And that lesson is this, that a handful of rich white men can lose a lot of money without any help from black people, without any help from Mexican folk, without any help from Asian Americans, without any help from indigenous Native North American First Nations peoples, without any people of color even in their Rolodex, let alone in their neighborhood, just the wealthiest, smartest, MBA having, high IQ, high SAT, MCAT, LSAT, GRE having white dudes on Wall Street took $12 trillion of wealth and destroyed it in 5 years. That is fascinating. 20% of all the wealth accumulated in this country's history over a 2-century-plus period gone in 5 years. Do you have any idea how long it would take for black and brown street thugs to steal $12 trillion? I mean, if you've given it any thought, how long it would take for all the black and brown street thugs combined to walk off with the kind of money that a handful of rich white guys just evaporated from the world economy and our own wealth as a country in a matter of 5 years. No, you can't, because it couldn't be done. We're still more afraid of black and brown street thugs, or even not street thugs, just black and brown men, period, thug or not, crossing the street towards us in a hoodie than we are afraid of rich white men driving around in their Lexuses, or maybe the proper term is Lexi, I don't know. Maybe some of y'all English majors tell me the proper form, but you understand, because we've inherited that legacy too, you see. Not just the wealth disparities, but we've inherited the legacy of who we're supposed to fear. And we're supposed to fear the usual suspects. We're supposed to be afraid of them, even though they could not do the kind of damage to this country and to us individually and collectively as a society if you gave them 5,000 years to do the deed that some have done in less than a decade. So we've inherited all that legacy. We've inherited something else too, and I think about it as a father, you see, very often. We've also inherited this mentality that justifies all of it, that rationalizes all of the inequality, that makes it okay, makes it seem like it's no big deal. What am I talking about? I'm speaking of the operative methodology, modality, the operative mythology of America, the secular gospel, if you will. You know? What is the secular gospel of this country? It's very simple. And it's something that we're all raised on, whether we are white or of color, whether we are male or female, rich or poor, middle class, working class, anywhere in between, gay, straight, doesn't matter whether we are Christian, Jew, Muslim, agnostic, atheist, Buddhist, anything else, whatever we are exposed to this secular gospel. It is the myth of meritocracy, this idea that wherever we end up in life is all about us, and so if we made it, it's because we worked harder. If we didn't, it's our own fault. Now, if you raise children on that, and I understand why we tell children that it's supposed to incentivize hard work. I get it. But if you tell people that and you do not give them the asterisk at the end of the sentence that leads them to actually explore all the things that make that statement untrue, like the institutionalized racism, institutionalized sexism and patriarchal oppression of women, institutionalized straight supremacy and cisgendered supremacy, that being the term for those who are not transgendered, in case you are not familiar with the term. If you do not talk about all the things, the class system and all the things that get in the way of that mythology being accurate, then those young people grow up having been told the myth, not given the caveat to the myth, and then they come to their own conclusions, as children are wont to do, right? Because if I tell a child, wherever you end up is all about your own hard work and your own effort, then that child becomes an adult and they can look around and they can see the disparity with their own eyes. They don't have to be a sociologist to do it. They don't have to be an anthropologist to do it. They just have to be awake. And they look around and they know who has what, and they start to ask why. And they know who doesn't have what, and they start to ask why not. And if the only thing we've given them is this idea and the notion of individualism and merit, then the only conclusions they can reach are racist ones. The only conclusions they can reach are sexist ones. The only conclusions they can reach are classist ones, right? Ones that say, well, the reason those folks are at the bottom disproportionately is because there's something wrong with them. Maybe it's their culture, maybe it's their family, it's their mama, or maybe even it's their genes, it's their biology, their DNA, something's wrong, you see. So we've inherited this legacy of this mythology, and it does its own work on otherwise innocent people who were taken from that notion of innocence and turned into something that they weren't meant to be. I'll have